I have the privilege periodically to bring friends of mine here to Jessup Chapel, and today you are in for a rare treat. Rick Rusaw is a pastor, he's an entrepreneur, he's a marketplace leader, he is a social strategist, he's a transformational dude, and he is just basically an all-around stud. So please give a warm Jessup welcome to Rick Rusaw. Rick, come on up.
I love what happens on your campus as you look at ways to innovate and reach out and get connected. And I know it's midterms and you're going like, man, I just wish this were over. So hang in, and we're going to talk about a couple things today that I think matter a big deal. In fact, what would happen if we got better at the two things Jesus said mattered most? We're going to look at that. Last week, I was flying from Orlando back to Denver, where I live. And we were going down the runway where we were just at the point of takeoff when the pilot hit the brakes, hit the thrusters back, and we screeched to a stop on this runway. Everybody on the plane at this point is panicking. We got back to the gate, and they said, we're going to be here for a little bit. If you want to get off the plane, use the restroom. Well, about 3/4 of the plane got off and never came back. I mean, people were like, I'm not getting on this thing. Back in my 20s, I was living in Fort Myers, Florida, and working in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I would fly out Sunday night to Cincinnati and fly back Thursday night. I was on an airline at the time, was like the Walmart of airlines. If you got to the gate and the pilot said, has anybody flown before? And you raised your hand, you got to sit up next to him, go through the checklist. I mean, it was that kind of cheap airline. And I fly a ton, I'm not a nervous flyer, and we're going down the runway, and all of a sudden he backs the engines off. I didn't hit the brakes, we just rolled for a while to a stop. And he sat at the edge of the runway, revving engines up and down, and after a few minutes, he turned the plane around, started going the other direction down the runway, and now everybody on the plane's leaning forward, like somehow that's going to help us, and the same thing. This time, 3/4 of the way down the runway, he hits the brakes, backs off the engines, we shudder to a stop, and he revs engines up and down, now, at this point, everybody is paying attention. Seated next to me was a lady who was in her mid to late 70s, and it was her very first time on an airplane. She was the only person not nervous. I think she was thinking, well, you know, they got to warm this puppy up a few times before they finally take off. Finally, the pilot came on. He said, folks, we're having a problem with the plane. It's like, whoa, hey, thanks for that announcement. And then he said this, we're going to go back in the terminal and change aircraft because it's our policy at Florida Express. If there's something wrong with the plane, we don't fly. That's a great motto for an airline. You know, safety first is a marvelous motto for the airline, but it's terrible to live by, right? Because you and I are invited to take risk all the time. Risk in relationships, risk in career choices, risk in educational stuff, a risk in just pulling out on the highway. Today, we are involved in a risky life, and here's what I believe. I believe grace is a risky thing. I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't grow up in a Christian family. I was the first Christian in our home in upstate New York in like a couple of generations. We still have trouble getting family reunions because we can't get parole dates to coincide. We got kind of this messed up family stuff. And when I first heard there was a God who cared about me, loved me, it invited me on to a journey that's been full of risk. At LifeBridge, we say this at our church, we want to be a safe place for you to hear a dangerous message. Because I think when God gets engaged in our lives and our hearts, there's some risk involved. And so I want to look at some risky things that Jesus invites us to. Luke chapter 10, if you have your Bibles, the words will be up on the screen as well. Here's what happens. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? You know, that's a big deal question, isn't it? That's a question people are still asking today. I live out in Boulder, Colorado. We got every kind of fruit and nut whack thing you can possibly have in our area, and yet people are interested in spiritual stuff. They want to know what happens when we die. What's written in the law? Jesus replied. How do you read it? And the man answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. You've answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this and you will live. But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? And Jesus is going to go on and tell a story, and it's a familiar story, whether you've ever been in the church or not before, the Good Samaritan story. But it starts with this command, the greatest command. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. In another place in the Gospels, Matthew chapter 22, Jesus gives this answer about what the greatest commandment is, and then he puts an exclamation point on it, and he says this, and all the law and all the prophets hang on these two commands. In other words, Jesus said everything that God's commanded, everything the prophets have spoken on his behalf, everything that's been uttered from God himself hangs on these two things: love God and love your neighbor. If you want the door of your life to swing more freely, hang it on those two hinges: love God and love your neighbor. What would happen if we'd get better at these two things that Jesus said mattered most? Love God with every fiber of your being, with your intellect, with your emotion, with your heart, with your strengths and your weaknesses. Love God with everything. And you know, I do love God. When I first heard, when I got invited to a high school retreat, that there was a God who loved me, it took me a while to process that and dig into the evidence. And I'm a bit of a skeptic and still am in so many ways. And yet I discovered here was this God who loved me. Of course I'm going to love him back. I want to love him back. He loved me. He loved me. No ifs, ands, or buts. Every other love you and I experience is conditional, has a comma in it, right? I love you if, I love you when, I love you but. And Jesus' love, God's love, is an I love you, period. There's nothing you or I are going to do today that's going to make God love us more, and there is nothing we're going to do today that's going to make God love us less. He loves you. And I want to love him back. And I've been a Christ follower for a while now, and I love God, but I love some other stuff too. I love Italian food. It's my favorite food. I love my wife, Diane. I love my kids. I especially love my grandkids. I'm glad I didn't kill my kids when they were growing up. I love my grandkids. I love the Buffalo Bills. I grew up in upstate New York, and if you love the Bills, if you're a football fan, that's a hard thing to do. It's a painful thing. I love Oreo cookies. I love Oreos. And sometimes I love Oreos more than I love God. Whatever your bag of Oreos happens to be. You know that thing that gets just a little more important? Sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes it's even some good thing you're doing on God's behalf that you put a little ahead of him. I love God, but sometimes not with every fiber of my being. And then Jesus kind of ramps it up here, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. I love my neighbor. I mean, look at the people sitting next to you. Love them. Yeesh. I get it. I know, the Bible says we got to love people. I love everybody. I love you and you and you. I don't like some of you, but I love it. Man, love others, that's hard. People disappoint us. People do things that are different than us. People don't look the same, don't act the same. They come from different experiences. We don't all come from the same standing. It's hard to love people. And then Jesus, when this attorney, this expert in the law, wants to know the fine print in the contract, says, who's my neighbor? He tells a story. It's a familiar story. Here's what Jesus says. In reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers, and they stripped him of his clothes. They beat him, and they went away, leaving him half dead. And a priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. And so to a Levite. A Levite was like a small group leader, an expert in the law, a theologian, someone who would really understand Scripture. When he came to the place, and he saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him, bandaged his wounds, poured on oil and wine, put the man on his donkey, brought him to an inn, took care of him. And the next day he took out some money and gave it to the innkeeper. Look after him, and when I return, I'll reimburse you for any extra expense you might have. Which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? And the expert in the law replied, well, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus said, go and do the same thing. Go and do the same. When Jesus tells a story, here's one of the things he's inviting us to do. He was inviting his audience, and he's inviting you and me to look in the story. He's holding a mirror up, and he's saying, who are you in this story? Because there's some of us in the room that we're like the robbers. We manipulate and maneuver to get what we want. We're takers. We take, we abuse, and we misuse other relationships. And I know that some of us in this story, we're the guy that got robbed. We're left on the road, half dead, naked, and bleeding. We've been beat up. Some of you are feeling the pain of that right now. There's something going on in your heart and your life that is creating a ton of pain for you right now. Some of you experience some tough stuff at the hands of somebody else, emotional, physical, sexual, whatever it might be, some kind of abuse. Or some of you have had your heart broken. Some of you are bleeding right now. And here's a clue. Not every half-dead, naked, bleeding person is laying on the side of the road. Sometimes they're sitting next to us in a room. Sometimes they share a sweet space with us. Sometimes they work across the hall from us. Some of us are like the priest and the Levite. They're the religious guys, right? They got the love God, love your neighbor thing down. They were the ones who were teaching others how to love God. They would make sure you loved God and loved your neighbor. They had all kinds of rules about how loving God and love your neighbor was. And here they are, and they passed by on the other side. And I remember the first time I read this story, and I thought, how could these guys do that? I mean, these were the God guys. Why were they doing that? And yet I think they were asking a question that I asked, and I know our church asked for a long time, and that was this: if I stop and help this guy, what's going to happen to me? Maybe I'll get beat up. Maybe I'll be taking stuff from me. Maybe I'll be left on the road half dead, naked, and bleeding. Or maybe they were on their way to talk to some people about how they ought to love God and love their neighbor, and they would have been late if they'd have stopped to help this guy. And then Jesus, as he often does, this ironic twist of the knife, because Jews and Samaritans hate each other. We got a lot of racial tension in the U.S. today, and it was equally as high in Jesus' day. Samaritans and Jews hated each other. If you were a Jewish person and you were in a marketplace and a Samaritan walked by you and their shadow hit your groceries or your goods, you would drop them in the street and walk home because they were no longer any value. And Jesus says, and the Samaritan, look what he did. He's a good guy, and there's 5 things he did. And I want to hit him real quick because here's what the Samaritan asked. He asked a different question. He said, what's going to happen to this guy if I don't stop and help? The first thing this guy did was he saw the man. Verse 33, a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, I've been amazed at how often I didn't see people. Looked right past them, looked right through them, almost as if they didn't exist. Or worse, saw someone and placed them in a box, put them on a shelf, categorized them, labeled them somehow, and passed by, missed out. Because so often you and I are blind to the stuff going on around us. We just don't see it. Several years ago, one of our staff members was reading a devotional book with his daughters, and they got to a place about praying for widows and orphans. And when they got to that part, he said, we know some widows. We have some in our family. We know plenty in our church, but we don't know any orphans, because after all, orphans are in Romania or Haiti or other places in the world. And yet in the U.S., we have a significant orphan problem. There's over 600,000 kids in the foster care system today. And so we went to our local foster care, Child Protective Services. Now, we're in Boulder, and Boulder, we have what we call ABC people, anything but church. I mean, they're for anything but church. And we met with the director of Child Protective Services. Says, is there anything our church could do to help out with foster care kids? Because the guy who'd been reading this devotional, they started praying for foster care kids. Then they became a foster family, and then they invited our church to figure out how to get involved. And so we went and asked, and she said, absolutely not. I don't really see the church of much use or value, and I don't really see any way, but thanks for asking. But one of her assistants said, we need a place, a location, to do a family training thing. Would you host it? And so we did. And that journey took us about on a 5-year journey that's now been a 20-year journey for us, where we started recruiting families for foster care. And she stood up one time among her peers in the state of Colorado and said, we just had something happen that's never happened in our 75 years at Child Protective Services in Boulder. We have more homes available than we have kids who need a home. And she said, that's because there's this church that's kind of helping us out. And that led us to realize there's a bigger problem in foster care. Several 100,000 children in foster care today are eligible for adoption, meaning they've been emancipated, set free from their parents for whatever reason. And if a child ages out of the foster care system, if they turn 18 and are out of the system, 89% of those kids end up homeless, addicted, trafficked, or in prison, or some combination of those things. And so we started asking, what could we do to help that? And we started telling these kids stories. We'd just tell their stories. We'd show it on video, and we'd take it to churches and businesses, and we were able to take 1,200 kids in Colorado who needed adoption and get it down today where it stays under 200, because there's new kids coming in every day. And 22 other states in the U.S. have asked our church to come and help that. And it all happened because there was somebody who opened their eyes to a need that most of us never even saw. How are you keeping your eyes open? Here's the second thing this guy did. Got his hands dirty. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. You know, if we're going to get involved in our world, if we're going to get involved in the stuff going on around us, if we're going to love our neighbors like the people that live next door to us, we're going to love them. That's a messy business, isn't it? Why? Because you're messy, I'm messy. We got warts and wounds and wobbles. We all walk with a limp. We all got stuff. And sometimes half-dead, naked, bleeding people bleed on us. Now, I've become a bit of a germaphobe. I have no idea how that's happened or why. Over the years, it's getting worse for me. I mean, like I watch people come in, they want to shake your hand, right? And you can see them coming. They're doing that. And it's like, man, I'm not touching you. I don't want anything. And if I were to do mouth to mouth with this guy laying on the road half dead, it would have been like this. I just don't want to get that close. But the truth is, if we're going to get engaged, people are messy. They are messy. There was a guy who showed up in our church in our lobby and sat down with our pastor of the day, who was dealing with the lobby stuff, and said, I'm 55 years old, and I'm afraid I'm going to die before I know what it's like for somebody to love me. He said, I was physically and sexually abused. I ran away from home when I was 11. I haven't been sober since I was 13 or 14. I can't keep a job. I don't even know why I'm here. And he said, I hate God. I hate the church. But I need some gas money. So we helped him out with a little gas, and he started showing up. He started hanging out. We went to lunch with him a few times. Paul started hanging in our lobby. We started chatting with him. Paul was an angry dude. We helped him find a job, and about every 4 days he'd get fired. So after a while, we just hired him at church, and he started helping out in our facilities area. And I'd see Paul, and I'd come out of my office late at night, and he'd be standing next to my car, and we would talk for hours about all this stuff, and how could God let this happen in his life? And he just kept pouring. I'd say, Paul, you ought to come to church sometime. He said, I ain't going to church. I hate you people. And here's the guy cleaning and helping us out. So, he was trying to figure that all out. And one Saturday night, he walked in the back of our service, and I saw him standing back there. He'd had a little liquid courage, I know, and he stood back there, and then he walked all the way down to the front while I'm talking, and he just stood there. And then he turned around, and he flipped the church off and walked back out the middle aisle. He had no idea how often I'd kind of wanted to do that, but just really, that's a whole nother story about some other stuff, really, so. Watch Paul start showing up once in a while on Saturdays, and then a few Sunday mornings, and then I watched Paul come out of our baptistry one weekend and embracing grace in his life. He was still messy, because we all are. But I watched this guy discover God's love, because some people were just a good neighbor to him. We had a little trailer behind our church building where Paul lived, and that we'd fixed up for him. And every Sunday morning, our staff would meet early to pray, and he would come in and start joining us. He wouldn't pray, but he would stand with us. And one Sunday morning early, he wasn't there, and I remember walking out to the back to see, and he died overnight in that place. But I know that there was a guy who needed somebody to see him and get their hands dirty. Here's the third thing this guy did. He was inconvenienced. He put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn, took care of him. I'm guessing he didn't get up that morning and say to his wife, hey, I hope that I find somebody laying on the road half dead, naked, and bleeding. I bet behind his donkey was a little 501c3 trailer. Here, we're the half dead, helping naked, bleeding people ministry. Please support us. I'm guessing he was doing what you and I are going to be doing today. We're going to work, going to school, headed to class, doing whatever. And then there's going to be this opportunity, and we get to choose. We always choose in those places. Because the stuff I've discovered that's good for my heart is never convenient for me. My doctor said to me, hey, both your parents have had heart stuff. You need to start paying better attention. You need to eat a little better than I know you do, and you need to exercise more. And, man, I don't want to do either of those things. I really don't. My idea of exercise is fill the tub with hot water and pull the drain and fight the current. I don't want to exercise. And I love donuts. I think donuts, if donuts were a drug, I'd be on a corner with a sign somewhere. But for 2 years now, I've not had a donut. The other day, I was driving through Longmont, and there's a Winchell's donut place on our main street, and I said, God, if you want me to have a donut, have a parking place open right in front of the store, and I'll take that as a sign. And you're not going to believe this happened. My 6th time around the block. Because the stuff that's good for my heart isn't stuff I want to do, is it? When Jesus says, love God and love your neighbor, man, that's good for me, but it is not convenient. The next thing this guy did, I think it's implied here. He befriended the guy, put the man on his donkey, took him to an inn, and took care of him. he took care of him. I'm guessing he got to know his name. I'm guessing he got to hear his story. I'm guessing he got to get engaged. Here's what I know. The disenfranchised of the world need our friendship more than anything else. We started getting involved with single moms about 15 years ago. Fastest growing households in America are single moms. There's substantive issues. Kids are at risk. Our church does a lot for at-risk kids. We just decided to get involved upstream and help kids. Here's what I know. The single moms, the couple hundred that show up on Wednesday night for some mentoring stuff we're doing, or that use the car clinic or our clothes and short-term financing stuff, what they want is for someone to be engaged in their life. My wife has done a great job of getting connected. We've got a lady in our church, Teresa, who she's good friends with, and we've helped out their kids and done some stuff, and we just love Terry. Diane took her shopping a while back because that's my wife's spiritual gift, and when she got there, in fact, not too long ago, different story. Not too long ago, Diane was out shopping and got her wallet stolen, all her credit cards. I haven't turned them in yet though, because the guy that stole them is using them less than she was, so I'm still kind of ahead here on this. But they went shopping that morning, and she said, "Terry, I just want to shop for you. You need some stuff. Let's just do that." And they went to lunch, and they had a great time. And at the end of that lunch, Terry said to Diane, "You know, you've done a lot for me, and I appreciate that. And you invest in my kids, and I appreciate that. But it's your friendship that means the most to me." Let me ask an awkward question. It's an ill-phrased question. I don't know a better way to ask it. But who are you friends with right now that somehow in your picture, in your view, you view them as less than some way? Someone who needs you, not that you necessarily need them. And the truth is, I got more out of my friendship with Paul than Paul ever got from me. And the last thing this guy did was he gave him some money. Next day, he took out 2 silver coins, gave him the innkeeper, look after him. He said, "When I return, I'll reimburse you." You know, one of the first things I've done is give money, and organizations need our money. You guys had some stuff in your announcements about helping out with homeless here in the city, and that's an awesome thing, and they need your resources. But our church and I used to write checks because it would make me feel better. I didn't feel so guilty. And we made a decision a long time ago that as a family and as a church, we were no longer going to write a check to some place where we weren't also going to choose to get engaged somehow. Because sometimes the first thing we do is give some cash and then walk away and feel like we did something useful. Well, there's really one other thing this guy did that I think is just really cool here in this passage. It's actually the best thing this guy did. He saw the guy, and he got off his donkey, and he helped him. What would happen? What would happen on this campus? What would happen in this part of Rockland alone? What would happen in your space if we would just get off our... What does it look like for you? What does that mean for you? If you and I just choose to be intentional about getting better at the 2 things that Jesus said matter most. And here's what I know, there's some risk involved in that. There's some risk that it's not going to go like you think it's going to go. There's some risk that it might cost you something. There's some risk that it might get a little messy at times. There's some risk, but here's what I also know. There's incredible reward with that. Because God invites me to love Him. And if I love Him with every fiber of my being, here's what He says is going to happen. The rest of that is going to spill out of you. It's going to flow out of you. It's going to show up in how you live and how you act. It's going to help you see people that most of the time we just blow right past. I think grace is a dangerous thing. And I love the Apostle Paul's words in Ephesians chapter 2 when he says, "For it is by grace we've been saved through faith, that not of ourselves, it is a gift from God, not of works, that any one of us would boast." And I love those words. I didn't earn it. I don't deserve it. I'm grateful for how grace changed my heart, changed my family's life, changed the trajectory of what I ended up doing in my days. But if Ephesians 2:8-9 is true for you, and even here in a Christian University chapel, I'm not going to assume it's true for all of you. But if it's true for you, then so is verse 10. And here's what verse 10 says. "For we are God's workmanship, created in Christ to do good things that God already prepared in advance for us to do. There's a part of God's story he's wanting you to write. There's a part of God's story he's needing you to be engaged in. There are some plans and some things that he has for you to do. And if you and I keep our eyes and our hearts open, we never know what God might do in somebody else's life. So Jessup, get off your donkeys and go do something. God bless you.